The game of chess has been played for many centuries in many lands, with pieces of many patterns. But today, there is one style of chess set that is preferred around the world, the standard for international tournaments since 1924, the default style that everyone, whether they know how to play the game or not, recognizes as what chess pieces should look like. It is the Staunton pattern, introduced in London in 1849. Now, you might think it was created by a person or a business named Staunton, or in a town called Staunton, but that is not the case, and thereby hangs the tale of its design and the remarkable man who was Howard Staunton, and the effect he had upon the world of chess. In his prime, he was the best player in England, and when he defeated the French champion Saint-Amand in 1843 at the Café de la Régence in Paris, many people considered him the best in the world, although it's impossible to know, as there was not yet a world championship. He would organize the first in 1851. Before Staunton came on the scene, Paris was the chess capital of Europe, and the Café de la Régence was the place to play. And these were the pieces that were their preferred, subsequently known as the Régence, a style which was popular from the late 18th century right through the 19th into the 20th century. Now, looking at it today, there was a bit of confusion. This, one would assume, is the queen because of the round top to it, but in fact the king is always the tallest piece, and this rather insignificant character is the queen, looking quite like the bishop and the pawn, all with this unadorned sphere on top. The rook and the knight are quite representational, but these pieces are much more abstract, and that might be considered a design flaw in some circles, an inconsistency of treatment. Nonetheless, the Régence was a popular style, relatively simple and economical to turn on a lathe without expensive hand carving, offering the turner considerable opportunity to smartly move the cutting tool about, creating visually dynamic and tactile configurations. The royals have fat bottoms, shaped like a kettle drum. The white pieces are made of boxwood and the black of ebony, both woods with a fine grain imperceptible to the eye. Boxwood often has small blemishes, but these are considered a mark of character. Throughout the 19th century, the Barleycorn, was one of the most popular styles in England. It's named Barleycorn after these knurled patterns on the body of the king and the queen. Looking at it today, as with the Régence, one wonders which is the king and which is the queen. The king is always the tallest piece. Again, the queen has the sphere on top. The bodies of the pieces are attached to the base by screw threads. They really do come apart into a lot of different pieces. Very intricate. The Shinnstitute's example, dating from the mid-19th century, is made of cow bone, as most were. The non-white pieces were typically stained red. Bone, readily available from the local knacker's yard, was an inexpensive alternative to the more exotic materials of ivory and ebony. The high, barrel-shaped bodies of the royals exploit the hollow centers of the bones for impressive effect without being too top-heavy, but at the risk of obscuring pawns in the next rank. This style is all about the lathe turner's art. The lathe, although ancient, was the mother tool of the Industrial Revolution, essential to pistons, pumps, and the screw threads that would enable standardization, precision, and replicability. We've seen that the design of the queen in the most popular French and English patterns was problematic. The Staunton queen addressed that issue, ultimately deposing the old queens. But how and why was this new design of the queen, its key innovation, achieved? 3 people were involved, each in their own way a successful entrepreneur. The first of these was John Jakes II, owner of a family business manufacturing equipment for games such as croquet and chess. He was a skilled turner, apprenticed to his father at an early age, and the Jakes business catered to an elite bourgeois clientele, producing chess sets in many patterns. The second man was Nathaniel Cook, the visionary co-founder of the first illustrated newspaper in the world in 1841. At the time, daily newspapers such as The Times were typically an 8-page sheet with a single illustration, if that. They were expensive bourgeois media constrained by newspaper taxes and advertising taxes. Weekly and monthly magazines followed the smaller format of books with a plain, repeated cover and a few illustrations throughout. Single-sheet satirical prints had stimulated the public's growing taste for a steady diet of visual excitement through the work of Rowlandson, Gilray, and Cruikshank in the early 1800s. Cook and his partner mashed up these genres into a radical new format, putting illustrations on every page of the large format, weekly, Illustrated London News. It was an undertaking of huge size and complexity in the days before typewriters and typesetting machines, with every character of type hand-set and every artwork and photograph laboriously engraved by hand, halftones not arriving until late in the century. The technology was, however, rich in quality. The type was small and precious, as can be seen in comparison with 1945 or today. The paper was bright and supple, made from rags, absorbing dense black ink from engravings of superlative skill. There were changes afoot, technical and legislative, which made the logistics of such scale and quality possible, most notably reduction of publishing taxes. Railways connected London with Birmingham and Manchester in 1837 for a wider market, with people also now reading in transit, buying papers at new outlets in railway stations. Postal service was introduced in 1840, by which classified advertising copy was delivered to the paper. This was the economic engine of the paper. But massive expansion would not have been possible without the culture of journalistic writing, typography, and woodblock printing that had emerged in the early decades of the century. By 1855, the London Illustrated News circulation was more than 200,000 every week, 10 times that of dailies such as The Times. Howard Staunton was, of course, the third man. His day job was writing, and like his almost exact contemporary Charles Dickens, with whom he shared a penchant for extravagant attire and an early flirtation with acting, he began his career as a hack journalist on Grub Street, progressed to regular columns and editing entire periodicals, and eventually wrote books. In Staunton's case, his magnum opus was editing and annotating the complete works of Shakespeare. But his speciality was chess. As the chess columnist for the Illustrated London News, he influenced a massive audience. There were no cartoons in this paper, leave that to Punch, and crossword puzzles would not be invented until the next century. Before the internet, TV, radio and movies, print was the mass media, and the chess column a phenomenon. Up front, Staunton responded to readers' letters. This was an interactive feature of early magazines. But what was it that made chess journalism feasible besides Staunton's relentless industry? Typography. With each piece and square a reusable piece of type, making it easy to rearrange the pieces and set a fresh puzzle every week, without having to engrave the whole board and pieces. In position, every time. That and abbreviated notation, the coding introduced in the 1817 edition of Philidor's classic Analysis of the Game of Chess, replacing the author's verbose spelling out of every move in full. Prominently featured in the new media of the day, play of chess spread from friendly games at home and in coffee houses. Now people could study puzzles by themselves, play by mail, or even telegraph, join local chess clubs and enter tournaments. Howard Staunton was driven not just as a player, but as someone who sought to increase the status of his game within society and see it flourish. he succeeded mightily on all counts. But it rankled him to play with chess sets that contained, in his opinion, ugly pieces of obscure identity, or which obscured other pieces or were poorly balanced. Worse still, players were reluctant to play with each other's sets, having difficulty recognizing the pieces. Clearly, a new design was called for the good of chess. While the full circumstances of the Staunton pattern's origin are not known, we do know that these three men, Cook, Jakes and Staunton, were part of the same social circle. Jake's daughter married Cook's son, in fact. One can imagine a conversation at their London club, Simpson's by the Strand. "Dash it all," says Staunton. "I detest those confounded Régence pieces. Can't tell the silly bishop from the queen." "Heavens," says Jakes, "our English sets also leave much to be desired. Why, the queen has no crown." And that was indeed a serious shortcoming with Victoria on the throne this past decade. "I say," says Cook, "I crown the lady every week." For indeed, typographic convention represented the king by the English coronation crown, topped by a cross, and the queen by a coronet or tiara. So, here comes the epiphany to model the third dimension king and queen on the second. Which of the three men came up with the idea? Or perhaps one of their spouses? Who drew up the finished designs that were patented by Cook in 1849 and then prototyped by Jakes? Or was Jakes the prime mover, incorporating Staunton's demand for stability and simplicity? We can never know, but we do know that Staunton signed his name to each of the first 500 sets Jakes sold and received a royalty for the use of his celebrated name and voluble promotion of his pattern. It was the first celebrity branding of a consumer product. Beyond applying typographic convention to the pattern of a real chess set, the Staunton style succeeds aesthetically through its practicality. Often described as neoclassical in simplicity and absence of ornament, and with reference to the horses on the Elgin marbles from the Parthenon frieze. However, if being neoclassical means, in the architectural sense, looking less like something that could pass for a garden ornament and more like an actual building, say the Eddystone Lighthouse, then I would agree with that. But really, this is functionalism, to the brief of Howard Staunton, chessmaster. Here is how he pimped his eponymous design in his chess column in the Illustrated London News. "In the simplicity and elegance of their form, combining apparent lightness with real solidity, in the nicety of their proportions one with another, so that in the most intricate positions every piece stands out distinctively, neither hidden nor overshadowed by its fellows, the Staunton chessmen are incomparably superior to any other we have ever seen." The Staunton design did not immediately supplant all others, but their days were numbered. One does expect a certain amount of consistency between the typographic image and the real-world pieces, and this the Staunton provided. In front, the de Berny foundry provided chess type icons in the Régence style, mid-19th century, which did indeed correspond with the real world, but the distinction between the pieces was poor. The Staunton pattern dominates, providing synergy between the board and the page, and today with the digital screen, where it corresponds with the symbols used at chess.com with their millions of subscribers. My grandfather taught me to play chess as a young child. This book rekindled my interest when I was at art school. In particular, here is a game recorded by that international chess master, Marcel Duchamp. And also, here he is playing a match using the pieces designed by Man Ray, a modernist set. That was probably what inspired me to design my own set in the Art Deco style. Nonetheless, the iconography is pure Staunton. As you can see, the king has the cross on top and the queen the coronet.